Hey car peeps on the internet, it's been a while. Welcome back to JODO Garage. Working on this 67 Mustang based on a 22 Mach 1. A lot has happened since last time, so let's get right into it. So this is where we stand right now. The side panels are on and brought in the front bow, the rear panel, the roof cross brace, and then the filler panel and the cowl. Just to kind of see where things are at and what else we have to work on. One thing I'm doing a little bit differently is I'm making use of the cross brace for the rear here. A couple of things it does, obviously, it ties in the two outer panels, and it is going to be here where that ties in. There's a nice edge. This will overlap this. This will get welded together. Obviously same on this side. You can see there's a little bit of overlap here. That's still showing. Obviously it's not sitting right in the spot yet where it needs to be. However, all it took was basically taking the cut this and cut that. So a triangle cut out of the side on each side to kind of make that fill in there. Again, needs a little bit of tweaking, but what it also does is it takes the filler panel and puts it where it needs to be. So that will be nice. And overall, it's just better structurally to have that. And in addition, of course, the rear hinges are mounted from this structure and will therefore be much easier to align with the trunk, etc. So physically what we've done there, sort of made a compass and made a line. I had to add a little bit of tape here because we're getting on the body. And now we got a cut line that we can follow. Now, knowing that this is not an exact science yet, we've got our body on there. It's hooked around the upper door post at the bottom. Lifting in the back there a little bit, but you know, again, this is just no perfect science yet. We're off here a little bit. We got to go back a little bit. But we are lined up at the roof line here pretty good by the window line, and then ballpark it sits around where it's gonna need to sit. And what do we see here? We see the fender sticking out a little ways. And what does that look like? In or about 3 inches. So once the wheel gets in there, then I can start building off of this edge. Start building it out, make an arch that comes off of this arch, possibly cut this back to about here or maybe even here. And then I can build off of that to make a new outside edge for the fender flare. Then we're gonna build an air intake duct through here that ties into that fender. And so you start laying down some body panels, all of a sudden it starts looking like a half a car. So obviously we haven't done anything with the cowl yet, but it's sort of in the spot where obviously it needs a lot of modification. On the front here, right now it's tilting back, as you can see, and that's not how it sits on the 67 Mustang. So obviously we need to do some surgery on this front end, but I'm not quite ready to jump on that yet. Got the roof laid on top and clamped in place where it's supposed to sit in these corners on both sides. Then, as we showed earlier, the quarter panel over the fender wells. And then in the rear, we've got the trunk panel, trunk separation panel, sort of sitting in place. Again, everything very loosey-goosey, nothing exactly where it needs to be, but you can start seeing the direction that it's going in. And I had a bunch of the side panels on and roof on and stuff like that, but I was having a hard time getting to where it needed to sit in the right spot. So what I decided to do is to build the car, more or less, off the chassis on the ground. And what I did is I put a framework on the floor with a center line right here, and then I have one line that's going alongside there, and then one line going alongside here. And that's to make sure that I'm keeping everything square. Then put a piece of wood and a strap across the back so that that would stay true. And I put a strap across the front to make sure that it stayed true. Then I put a line on the chassis right there. And I did that on both sides so that it would sit on this line here to keep it even. As you can see, this one walked a little bit, but I've been reefing on the chassis and everything to get things to fit. So what do? We got, to get the width of the car proper, there are certain measurements that are floating around on the internet, and so a lot of it is determined by some of the panels. For instance, there is a measurement up here. Well, if you get this to sit properly, then you can only have that measurement. This fiddle panel is really determining the width over here, and that gets you where you need to be. And I put the taillight panel in, and that gets you to have the panels sit where they need to be. I cut the wheel well openings to fit over top of the fenders of the chassis, since I'm running the larger wheels. And then everything kind of started falling into place. I took the lap off here, but this is pretty much sitting where that needs to be. The biggest issue that I was running into is that the internet is telling us that the measurement from the inner flange underneath the window to the other inner flange on the other side has to be 48 inches. And I did that. I put the bow under here and I set it at 48 inches and I zip screwed it in, and then I started fighting with the roof panel. And I could not for the life of me get that roof panel to fit where this corner, I could get this corner in where it needed to be, but then if I went to the other corner, I would get a good 3/8 of an inch space between the roof line and the A-pillar. And then reverse, if I loosen this one, tighten the other one, and then try to tighten this one, I would get that 3/8 of an inch over here. And I kept fighting and fighting with it, which didn't make any sense. I ended up putting the cowl, the lower and upper cowl on to kind of get the spread of where that needed to sit. And then I decided, you know what, the windscreen is really gonna tell me where everything's gonna line up. And as I lay the windscreen in there, it really showed that I was kind of off at the top. So that told me that that 48 inches is not necessarily where everything has to be. Building cars, there's always a gray area, right? And so for me, I said, you know what if I take the front bow underneath here loose, and I get the roof to sit where it needs to sit on the A pillars. So I tightened this one with a clamp, I tightened that one with a clamp, and then I ended up at about, I believe it was like 47.5 maybe. I'm like, then we have to try and see what that windshield looked like. So in order to do that, I had to zip screw a screw in there, and in order to take the clamp off, and did the same thing on the other side. So now got a pencil under here as a spacer, pencil under there as a spacer, and you can see that the space on the windshield is pretty even everywhere as you go around, and at the top as well. So I believe that that 48 inches is not necessarily something that is graved in stone, even though, you know, it's a good guide, but it's not going to be the same for everybody. So I hope that helps somebody that's in the same predicament, but for me, this is the way that I'm going to move forward. Okay, so what did we learn from building this on the floor? Well, there's a couple of measurements out of this. From here to the other side is 53.5 inches. From here to the other side is 53 7/8. And now that I got it on the car, if I put my tape measure across to the other side and I pull it tight on that side, and I go over here, I get to 55 3/4 inches. So 55 3/4 inches versus 53.5. We have 1.25 inches difference that we need to get narrower in that section. Now, here comes another issue to think about. I made a line, a center mark in the car, and then I measured from that center line to the outside of this, where I cut. Now, these cuts were made arbitrarily, sort of by eye, give or take. So what I found out is that from the center line to the edge of that was 28 inches. I did the same thing on the other side, and what I found out is it was 27.25. So I cut 3/4 more inches of the passenger side than I did the driver's side. So from center to the edge on the passenger side was 27.25 inch. From center to the edge on the driver's side was 28 inches. So there's a difference of 3/4 inches that I need to take more out of the driver's side to get even with the passenger side. Now I've got a total of 1.25 inch to make up, which means that I'm going to take a total of 1 inch out of the 28 to get the 27, and we're going to take 1/4 inch out of the 27.25 to get the 27, to even up the 27 inches on both sides, and I'll make up for my 1.25 inch total that I need to make the body narrower. The devil's in the details. So this is from one of the videos that I was watching from Chris and the team at B is for Build, where this lined up. And me having this lined up did not get me the width that I need side to side for the window to sit properly. And in rewatching the video, and it doesn't get mentioned, but it changes as they learn, and this is where I'm learning, so I'm pointing it out now, is that this is not where this ends up. This overlaps a good inch, maybe 1.5 inches into this, where this lines up more with that. And that makes a lot of sense, because if I can get an inch to inch and a half further in over here and on that side, again measuring from center so we got the same width, then we'll get this narrow enough so that it will fit. So having this sit nice and flush, this pretty decent. However, you can see there's a little bit of a gap here yet, which means that we cannot tilt this down far enough. Now, got plenty of room here, but you can see it starts hitting up here and further down here. So we need, this gap here is pretty good, but we need to bring this arch up a little bit more in this area to about here in order to let that rest nicely and make room so that it can sit properly. There we can see that we have a much more even gap now all the way across, except for in this area where we're still kind of hitting. We can make some more final adjustments, but I'm not going to cut any more until I get this side panel exactly where I want it, and then we can fine tune it. There, pretty nice clean cut. Of course, as usual, you get different layers. So, you know, you get different pockets, double layers, single layers, etc. You got to cut through. So again, you know, the approach of doing it a little bit at a time, and cut a piece out of the way that gives you access to other pieces, and you go from there. Now, one of the areas that I think I'm getting hung up on right now is this corner right here. So I think I'm gonna have to eliminate this so that it can really pocket into it. So I'm gonna cut that off, and then we're gonna put the panel back on and see where we're at. Okay, with that out of the way, we're gonna do another test fit. All right, gained a little bit. Slightly past this corner here now, which is good. I believe I'm getting cut off a little bit over here. And this corner still ready to flatten out a bit. And then, yeah, I definitely need to take the back edge of this off, because we're hitting the structure of the previous sill that was there, where the sill turns into the wheel arch. That's where the back of this is sitting now, and it's not long enough to go in any further. So I'm going to cut that off. Okay, that will give me the clearance here to get hopefully past the wheel well on the back. So here we got the cut off in the back that I just did, and that now allows for this to clear sort of into that pocket and makes this sit all the way in into here where we just made this other cut. Now this is sitting way better into here than it did previously, and now the focus is going to be how to further this along to make this disappear into there more. So we'll have to see, get a flashlight or something and have a look inside and see, okay, where are we getting hung up here? More progress. The roof is in place, and we are now starting to get a better fit in this area down through here. Used to have the bottom be fitting tight and the top here coming out, and that was a function of having not cut enough out of this wheel arch yet to clear, so that would lift this up. and by lifting that up, it would also kind of contort everything else. I had to do this on both sides, kind of cut more out of that wheel well opening, and all of a sudden things started to lay more flat and be more open and easier to deal with, instead of having to force things, which is of course never the way you want it. It should fall into place easy. Also started to cut out some more of the back in this area here. Cut some off the frame rail there, through here and through here, and then of course through this side as well. You see that you got the separation panel here between the window and the trunk lid in place to keep the width. I've got the tail panel here, the rear valance kind of clamped into place sort of to see where things are at, of course. So one of the other things that needs to happen is that the upper and lower cowl need to go on a diet. See some cut marks here along the entire perimeter, and then here as well, where we will make some cuts. This part of the panel will be used, this part will not. This will get welded to the underside of this to give proper fit, but it's also going to help me to make sure that this width from here to there, and I've talked about it before, that needs to be spot on, and I think we're still a little too narrow right now from where I had it when I was building it on the ground. So we're going to have a look after we cut this part off, which I had screwed onto here to get the proper width, and when I get this part off, then I can put it back on here and see what the width is like, and it's going to be a little bit easy to tell how much we still need to work with that in place. So here we have the hole lined up where it needs to be on this side from when I had to get it on the ground. So now we'll go around the other side and see where we line up. And we see that we're still a good 2 inches or so off from where we need to be. So that means we still need to bring those in further. It remains a puzzle and not an easy one. And there we have the cowl, put on a diet, so the upper cowl, we should say. I'm going to lay that on the car and see what that looks like. We can see here that with that extra metal cut away, now we don't impede on the area here, which is good. Clearly we're also going to still be too narrow with that, but we knew that. We just wanted to make room, so now we clear the battery tray as well. Of course, this lip I'm going to have to eventually meet with this lip here, because this is where the window sits, and this is where the window sits. I really wanted the Hillebrand style wheels like I had on my Daytona Coupe, and I couldn't find them in 19-inch, which I need to clear the calipers on the Mach 1, until I ran across KRNC Forged on Instagram. This being the first time building a 67 or 68 Mustang, you try to find reference points. Make sure that you got it all square and in the right position and everything. So this is the front bow. Now when you visually look at the front bow, there's a cutout right here. And you would think, you know, just visually looking at it, that would be like the center. The center of the gap would be the center of the bow. Well, as you can see, after I measured, it's actually offset to the left a little bit. And this kind of continues through the whole thing. So in the back, there's 3 holes. There's a hole right here. That is actually in the center, coming off of that mark right there. So what I've done now is I've taken measurement from the center line over, starting here, making 1/4 inch increments to this way, and then from that same center line going the other way, doing the same thing. So once I get this bow up in my profiles, my side profiles, I can sort of gauge where this sits as far as center goes. All right, so clamp the bow in place. Now, if I measure from that center line right here, so the far side of the gap, to this ledge, so the lip right here, I get 23 7/8 going both ways. Measurements that I've always heard is that from the inside of here to the inside of the other side should be 48 inches. So that's inner lip to lip. And it should be 50 and a half from the hip to the other hip. And if I have this centered like this, I get my 50 and a half from hip to hip, but I get 47 and a half inner lip to inner lip. So at this point, I've been head scratching too long, and I think that this inner lip size may vary, but this hip size can never vary. That always has to be the same. So I'm gonna go off of this 50 and a half, and that's where I'm gonna keep my bow, set it in place, and that seems to be a pretty decent spot for that. And then we're gonna move on to the center bow. So the next important measurement was the distance between this lip on this side and that same lip on that side. So what I did is I found the center of the bow and I measured 20 inches this way and 20 inches that way. And that would make up the 40 inches that we need to be from this lip to that lip. All right, so then I put the bow in place, lined this side up, and then found out that I was a little bit about a ½ inch off. So, little piece of wood to the rescue, pounded it in between to get this, the width to where it needed to be, and then clamped it, and then self-tapered some screws to hold it in place. Now that one's got 3. Note to self, there's not much meat in this lower bow left after this. So that second one over on that side, right there, is a failure. Complete failure. But the other 2 are holding in place nicely. So, doing all right. I think we did it. So sometimes a little bit of input can make all the difference. And one of the things that I reviewed today was Lost Socket Garage. He's been building coupe to fastback conversions for a while, and he's got a measurement video that I watched today. I think I watched it before, but probably didn't remember all of it. And one of the things that he was talking about was that brace that I was talking about earlier, that has to be 40 inches apart on the inside there. And then The other thing he mentioned was to get your gap between your filler panel and your rear window, you need to put the window as far back as possible as you can, and then work the front over your front bow. Now, getting that front bow to sit, or the roof to sit on that front bow, took a whole bunch of clamps. Started on the edge. The edges I was able to kind of pull in, and then with clamps, kind of one here, put some pressure on it, putting another one next to it, more pressure on this one, piece of wood, more clamps, etc. Was able to fold the front over, and I self-tapered that in place now so that it stays. And for the first time, because of that, my spacing from the center of that to the center of that is now 35.5 inches, the way it's supposed to be. And my diagonal measurements from there to there and from there to there are 54 inches, which means that it's square. I think a lot had to do with the fact that I also put the package tray back in place. I started with that a while ago, then I took it out and sort of left it for a while. But I decided, yeah, no, that's really an integral part of what sets up the side frames at the proper width. And I'm glad I did, because now that's basically where things sit. As you can see, we've had to trim some areas to get that around the 2022 chassis. Same thing on this side. However, now that it's kind of hanging, free floating, this is something that once I get everything where I wanted, I can start making some bracing from the 22 Mach 1 to the package tray and put that permanently in place. So once that's permanently in place, it also becomes a building block again for me to build on, because all these parts obviously have to come back apart again. We have to punch holes and basically weld them all together. So now the next steps are the filler panel. You can see there's a little bit of gap here, but there's this overhanging this a little bit yet. So this needs to be brought in. That needs to happen on both sides so that we get no gap here. And then this needs to sit properly into here on both sides. And then we go to the last measurement, which is 53 inches from here to here. And right now I think we're at about 54. So getting close. This is pretty exciting. It's a big move forward to have that roof and everything where it needs to be. Again, pulling it over the front wasn't easy. That took some force. But now that I have everything where it needs to be, obviously we know how to put it back together again too. And so next steps, again, working on the back. And I also want to get the drip rails in here, because I want to see how they fit. One of the things that I had going on before I had this in this place is that I felt there was always a big gap in between the side rails and my roof. And now that everything is tightened up, number one, the roof is really taut because it's sitting on the tension, I suppose. But this gap here is gone. I had a huge gap that I had, could stick my finger in easy on both sides. And now it's nice and tight under there, which I guess that's how it's supposed to be. So, good things happening, more good things to come. Well, if you got a rubber mallet and a battery drill, you can hold up a windshield. So basically, even overlap everywhere. And I also put some tape down as sort of the window line where the cowl piece here, and then I have to sit. So once I get this taken out again and get working on the front, then that gives me sort of a reference where that should line up. Got to do a little bit more work on this vent. I still want to see if I can retain that somehow, if there's enough room for me to sneak a self-made duct underneath the window. And this had vanes that were curved in this way and that way, so that the wind would blow over the whole windshield. So in a smaller version, maybe I can do that in the center section there. I'll have to take that apart and see if there's room. There is a gap as well on the opposite side here. We can have a peek at real quick. Right here. So there is some gap there, but I don't know if once we get the cowl and everything on it, if that's still going to be a gap or not. So that will be something that we'll have to look at. And then also the rear window in is a form fit, so pretty even gap all the way around. So that looks pretty decent. And then in the back, we're working on the light panel, the trunk corners, and then of course the valance. And I think I spoke to this before, but we have a situation here because of Meet Mach 1. This whole differential cooler is faced over here. What I think I'm gonna do, I don't know if I spoke to this before or not, but this well for the spare wheel, I think I'm gonna cut that somewhere along the top and then invert the whole well and weld it back in. So now it's a concave up instead of a wheel well down. And that will give me more room for that black box over there and this cooler to raise up and then hide behind the valance. So that's kind of the idea there. Also have to get the exhaust tips off, but it's sort of a nice placeholder for my valance right now, so haven't really done that. And then of course the other thing that we may need to do is reincorporate the previous bumper, well, not the bumper cover, but the actual bumper back into the structure. So that may entail getting these frame rails cut back a bit, because it's a curved piece. It comes out and comes back in. So I'll have to see, probably cut a little bit more off this side than that side since it's curving. Sorry, a little bit less off of this side, more of that side since it's curving, and see how we fit that. But I want to get all the body panels where they need to be first. Once I got done putting all these on, I was just looking at everything. I put a level across the rear hip to the rear hip there, put a level on it, and that side was significantly lower since, you know, none of the side panels are welded yet. And I started doing a bunch of measurements on the side rails, ended up jacking that side rail up to bring this up, and this is a lot better now. So yeah, progress.